March 2009. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, 50 miles east of San Francisco, California. This is one of the premier weapons research facilities in the U.S. Over the past 50 years, scientists here have developed some of the most lethal weapons known to man. From the Atlas Titan intercontinental ballistic missile to the Tomahawk cruise missile. But today, inside a special division of the lab known as the National Ignition Facility, scientists are developing one of the most challenging experimental systems ever created. The world's most powerful laser. Scientists have been working on this top-secret project since 1974. The goal: create a laser that produces energy levels that rival the power of a nuclear bomb. When fired, this laser is capable of unleashing the power of the sun. Enough energy to light up every home in the U.S. or wipe out mankind. How did they create a laser with such devastating force? By assembling an array of 192 lasers and aiming them at a single hydrogen pellet the size of a BB.
What we can do is focus this very high energy into a very small spot for a very short time. And when that happens, we get the conditions that are very much like inside our sun.
These 192 lasers are linked together by a twisting jungle of tubes that snake through this mammoth 10-story structure, which is the length of 3 football fields.
These gray tubes right over my head here are the beam tubes which contain the laser beams. You can see there are pairs of these beam tubes. In each one of these tubes there are laser beams stacked 4 high. So in each pair of beam tubes there are 8 laser beams.
The plan is to fire all 192 laser beams at once. Each beam starts out low-powered, about the size of what's inside your DVD player. But as they pass through the complex maze of tubes, they merge into one super beam. This super beam fires 500 terawatts of power in 2 billionths of a second, roughly 500 times the entire peak power output of the United States. When that light strikes the hydrogen pellet, it cooks it to over 800 million degrees, creating nuclear fusion and unleashing more energy than our sun. Harness this energy, and our dependency on fossil fuels could end forever. When these lasers go online in 2010, are we looking at the dawn of a new age in energy? Or are we looking at something else? A preview of the incomprehensible power that man could wield to fight the wars of the future. An effective laser weapon for use on the battlefield needs only a fraction of this power to destroy fighter jets, shoot down nuclear missiles, wipe out entire armies. Tomorrow's battles could look like a scene out of Star Wars. Powerful lasers on Earth beamed off of satellites in space to wipe out an enemy thousands of miles away.
If you have a powerful enough laser and a few properly positioned targeting satellites in orbit to reflect the beam, then you could fire a laser here in North America and deliver its energy to any spot on the surface of the Earth. It's not inconceivable that someday we will actually be able to produce that sort of death ray.
The lasers at Livermore are a chilling reminder of how close we may actually be to this type of technology. Although its intended use is for good, the application could be something out of a comic book. What is required to create a laser death ray? That's Impossible has assembled a to-do list. The weapon has to, 1, overcome energy's natural tendency to become diffused. 2, convert raw power into a highly charged energy beam. 3, be able to sustain that energy beam long enough for it to burn through steel. 4, make it mobile enough to put on a moving platform. Laser weapons and death rays sprung from the imagination of science fiction writers. It began with the 1898 release of the classic H.G. Wells novel, The War of the Worlds, in which Martian aliens attacked Earth with death beams, threatening to wipe out mankind. Quote, "It was sweeping round swiftly and steadily, this flaming death, this invisible, inevitable sword of heat."
That kind of super laser technology would be sort of a finger of God technology. You could basically reach down and crush anything on the Earth using this kind of laser technology.
The seeds had been planted for the invention of energy weapons. Even Albert Einstein jumped on board. His paper, On the Quantum Theory of Radiation, laid out the theory for turning science fiction into reality.
The origin of the laser goes back to a paper written in 1917 by Albert Einstein, in which he identified the fact that under the right circumstances, certain quantum mechanical effects should make it possible to hugely increase or amplify the intensity of a beam of light.
But Einstein's theory outpaced technology. Laser weapons remained out of man's reach until a certain popular TV show exploded on the scene in the 1960s. With its talk of phasers, energy shields, and of course, photon torpedoes. The original Star Trek.
The 1960s brought with it a push towards space. More significantly, for a lot of scientists, it brought the Star Trek TV series. Interestingly enough, that series had a tremendous impact. Our military leaders also saw what the Federation and the Klingons and the Romulans had to offer in offensive, defensive capabilities. And some of them said, we need some of that stuff to protect our nation.
Science fact finally caught up with science fiction when two scientists hatched the plans for building the first laser.
Where did lasers come from? They were invented by Charlie Towns and his brother-in-law, Art Shallow. And the story goes that they had a Navy contract to understand how to make an optical maser, they called it. And they sat on a bench on a Saturday morning and worked out all of the ideas of how to make it.
They called their invention a maser, but it would later be renamed a laser.
The term laser is an acronym. It stands for Light Amplification by Stimulated Emission of Radiation.
Their secret to building a laser? Change the way atoms behave. Atoms move in predictable patterns, but if they're exposed to very intense flashes of light, they become excited, and these hyperactive atoms are producing a tremendous amount of energy. In a flashlight, this energy would be released randomly in a scattered pattern. But in a laser, that frenzied energy is harnessed and released in a more directed, orderly pattern that generates piercing heat.
Immediately after the invention of the laser, there was a huge amount of excitement about, oh, look at all the things we'll try to do with this. And then it sort of occurred to people that they didn't have many applications. This was sort of a great invention without a purpose.
But the military eventually found a purpose. By 1962, the Department of Defense began weaponizing lasers as part of an arsenal that would come to be known as directed energy weapons. Like the electric discharge laser tested by the Army in 1983, the active denial system declassified in 2001, and Zeus, an anti-landmine laser deployed to Afghanistan in 2003.
The military values the idea of directed energy weapons for a lot of different reasons. One is that they can be extremely accurate. They also potentially give you ways of being able to attack your enemy from a great safe distance without having to, say, put any of your own troops at risk.
Silent, fast as the speed of light, and deadly accurate. The perfect weapon system. But could it be built? The Army's White Sands Missile Range, New Mexico, the year 2000. After years of development, the Army is preparing to test a revolutionary weapon, the Tactical High Energy Laser, also known as THEL. The THEL has undergone firing tests to measure its range and accuracy. But this will be the first attempt ever to shoot a live rocket out of the sky. The Pentagon wants this weapon deployed by 2015. This is a critical test to determine if they're on track to meet that goal. The first of its kind, it has the power to shoot down most anything that flies, from cruise missiles to unmanned aerial vehicles, even planes. It has a range of approximately 6 miles. But could it work in an actual field test? Dr. Beyer holds more than 50 laser-related patents and is one of the world's leading authorities on lasers. He demonstrates on a small scale how lasers might shoot a missile out of the sky.
So what we have is a 10-watt laser beam, green laser beam in this case, down the table. And this laser beam is enough power that you have to respect it. It can burn your skin badly or cause eye damage if it was in your eye. Let me illustrate that by putting a piece of paper in front of the beam. And you see immediately the paper then is burnt and catches fire and smoke comes from the beam. This is similar to what a high power laser would do in the field if an incoming missile were illuminated by a very high power laser.
The THEL is designed so that radar scans the horizon for threats. When it detects one, like an incoming missile, it will lock onto the target and calculate its trajectory. The THEL will then swivel towards the target and fire a high-powered laser beam. The beam is a few inches in diameter, but powerful enough to burn through steel. Within seconds, the intense heat from the laser will destroy the rocket in midair. This test, filmed on June 6, 2000, could determine the fate and the future of large-scale laser weapons. The THEL is about to attempt to do something no laser weapon has ever done. Shoot down a 122mm Katyusha rocket carrying a live 66-pound warhead and traveling at a speed of Mach 1. The moment of truth. The rocket is launched. Radar acquires the target. The laser locks onto it. The finger is on the trigger. But will it work? If so, how will it change warfare? And what if this technology falls into the hands of our enemy? June 6, 2000. White Sands Missile Range. The U.S. Army is carrying out a crucial test of a new laser weapon. It's the first trial to shoot down a live rocket in its 15-year development process. A signal is given, and in this actual footage of the test, the Katyusha rocket is launched. Radar locks onto it. The laser takes aim, fires, and in a flash, history is made. And we enter a brave new world. For the first time ever, a high-powered laser shoots down a rocket.
At that point, the general who was overseeing the test said, "We've just turned science fiction into reality."
Again, in slow motion, the Katyusha takes off at a speed of 760 miles per hour. After the radar locks on, you can see the high-powered laser illuminate the warhead. The temperature of the laser beam is over 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. On contact, the laser starts to heat up the quarter-inch thick rocket casing. Within a second, the rocket is destroyed. Death and destruction at the speed of light.
The typical shot is of the order of a second in duration. That delivers enough power to the target that it explodes.
According to military sources, the THEL will operate at a per-kill cost of approximately $3,000, making it one of the most inexpensive anti-missile systems in existence. By 2025, the Pentagon is expecting 20 of these on its warships and another 100 on its tanks.
You're transmitting energy through the atmosphere and focusing on the soft spot of the target. And you do that all with a radar tracking and the telescope that transmits the laser light focused on the target for that short period of time to heat it up until you damage it.
It's the telescope that is one of the keys to weaponizing the laser. It's what keeps the high-energy beam of light from diffusing and losing its power as it streaks through the sky.
The atmosphere is not very kind to propagating high-power lasers. The laser heats the atmosphere and that causes the beam to spread out. But there are ways around that, and the ways around that were invented for astronomy. and it's called adaptive optics.
Adaptive optics is what gives modern-day telescopes their remarkable ability to capture startling images like this, instead of this. The fuzziness is caused by turbulence in the atmosphere, which fractures the starlight as it passes through it. Adaptive optics corrects this using a mirror. When a laser is fired, the beam is bounced off a special mirror made of flexible material, much like a funhouse mirror. Behind the mirror are thousands of tiny piston-like devices, which are instructed by a computer to push and pull on the mirror, constantly adjusting it to compensate for the turbulence and keeping it on a straight path until it strikes a target. Remarkably, all of this plays out in a matter of milliseconds. But lasers won't be just ground-based. They may also be fired at us from the sky.
Lasers mounted on an aircraft are being studied by the military, and at some point these lasers will be small enough and efficient enough that you can put them on an aircraft in place of, let's say, a cannon, which is now mounted on an aircraft. Cannons weigh a great deal, and they fire bullets, and the jet aircraft actually catch up with the bullets they fire because they fly faster than the bullets go. So you have to be a little bit careful about what weapons you put on jet aircraft.
Edwards Air Force Base, Mojave Desert, California, nearly 100 miles north of Los Angeles. This is home to virtually every significant experimental aircraft ever flown. From Chuck Yeager's Bell X-1 that first broke the sound barrier, to the SR-71, the fastest aircraft ever built, to Burt Rutan's Spaceship One, the first manned commercial craft designed to carry vacationers into space. This is a place where aerodynamics is advanced by light years. Here, secreted away in a hangar, is a revolutionary aircraft. The Air Combat Command's USAF YAL-747. It's not the speed or how high it can fly that makes it so special. It's the cargo. The world's first airborne directed energy weapon, the airborne laser, also known as the ABL. Just mounting the ABL requires one of the most sophisticated and elaborate modifications in history. The entire nose section is removed and retrofitted, and the world's largest titanium plate is installed to hold the enormous turret-mounted laser in place. The ABL system is designed to find, track, and destroy an enemy target in the air and on the ground. It can loiter at 40,000 feet for 5 hours, refuel in midair, and destroy a target 60 miles away in less than a second.
You have only a microsecond to respond, and that's not enough time for any system to respond. So the laser is almost instantaneous. Aircraft don't fight each other at close range by dogfights anymore. That's because they fly with missiles, and the missiles today have a range of like 20 kilometers plus. So if you detect a not friendly aircraft that you wish to attack, you'll do so by radar, and you'll attack that when it's still well outside what I would call the range of old-fashioned cannons on aircraft. So we don't see dogfights close in now. What we see is missiles that are launched and go a distance. The laser itself has a speed of Mach 300,000, so it's 300,000 times faster than if I launch a missile from an aircraft. So in the future, it will not be aircraft in a dogfight. It will be aircraft at a distance being brought down by laser beams.
The Airborne Laser Project was launched in 1996 at a cost of over $1.5 billion. The weapon is projected to be combat-ready by 2015. There's also the fear that it could trigger a super high-tech arms race. Today, with lasers installed in virtually everything we use, from computers to CD players to video game systems, how long until our enemies have access to cheap, high-powered laser weapons?
In the era of energy weapons, we're almost certainly going to see exactly the same kind of arms race that we've seen with nuclear weapons and with other kind of weapons before them. The fact is that if the United States develops powerful lasers, other nations will develop powerful lasers. And as their lasers get more powerful, our lasers will have to get more powerful.
If there is an arms race, can that same technology also be scaled down to the size of handheld weapons? the type of ray guns once envisioned by Flash Gordon, or the blaster pistols and rifles used in Star Wars.
Is it possible to make it in the scale, the size that a human can carry? Yes. I don't need lasers much bigger than this to generate 1,000 watts of power. And 1,000 watts of power is enough to do real harm to a human being.
In movies and television, laser weapons always seem so clean and sterile. They bore holes through things, or they conveniently make things vaporize. But the reality of a laser weapon that was used against people would probably be much, much uglier. Imagine some sort of beam burning through your body. Lasers could be horrific and scarring and horrifying weapons.
And it's not the only sci-fi weapon within reach. Another directed energy weapon being developed can supposedly stop in its tracks a type of attack that claims thousands of lives without any collateral damage. Directed energy weapons are a critical component of tomorrow's military. And one weapon in development might prevent the type of attacks that have claimed thousands of lives. Mosul, Iraq, April 10th, 2009. A truck is heading down a long road leading towards the sprawling, forward-operating base Meres, the main U.S. military base in town. Unbeknown to Iraqi security forces patrolling the checkpoints along the route, the truck is packed with 2,000 pounds of explosives. The truck passes through a number of checkpoints. Then, as it approaches the final checkpoint, it picks up speed and barrels through it. Iraqi forces open fire on the truck, but the driver keeps going. Just outside the main entrance of the base, the driver detonates the explosives. The blast kills 5 American soldiers, 2 Iraqi security personnel, and injures 70. Lethal force didn't work. The suicide bomber was still able to carry out his mission. Stopping these types of attacks without using lethal force is something innovator and entrepreneur Pete Bitar is working on. He's developed an invention called the Zapper, a directed energy weapon for paralyzing ground vehicles.
It's easy to create weapons that kill. It's also easy to create weapons that project energy, but finding one that has an effect without killing is also very difficult. We thought maybe this was time to create systems that stop without having to kill and eliminate collateral damage that way.
His weapon is based on the principle that high volts of electricity can send out a pulse that disrupts electronics. In the case of the Zapper, it's designed with a pulse strong enough to fry the electronics of a car, virtually stopping it cold in its tracks. This massive pulse of energy is called an EMP, electromagnetic pulse. Think of it as a tsunami wave composed solely of energy. The first studies of these massive pulses of energy were carried out by scientists who were researching the effects of atomic bomb blasts. The familiar flash of light of an A-bomb is only part of the massive energy being released. There are also radio waves, microwaves, X-rays, and gamma rays being emitted. And the force of these waves racing through the atmosphere can be as destructive as a bomb. In July 1962, a 1.44 megaton nuclear bomb detonated 250 miles above the Pacific Ocean, called the Starfish Prime Test, caught even scientists by surprise, as the electromagnetic pulse it generated was much larger than calculated. It was felt in Hawaii, more than 800 miles away from the detonation point, knocking out about 300 streetlights and setting off burglar alarms. For the Zapper, Bitar is trying to take this same principle and miniaturize it, using a generator and a high-capacity transformer.
What it allows you to do is stop the vehicle safely, gradually, by killing its engine. Guards at checkpoints would then have a non-lethal option to deal with incoming vehicles without having to fire bullets.
The theory is intriguing, but can it really work? Bitar has agreed to test his invention for the first time ever on television. The plan is to drive an SUV into 175,000 volts of electricity, short-circuiting the engine and bringing the vehicle to a dead stop. he and his crew arrive at the Anderson Municipal Airport in rural Indiana and start setting up the experiment.
This is all kind of prototypey at this point. We have never done this with a vehicle moving at any speed. This is the main core system here. This is what we call the car zapper. The zapper is designed essentially to create a high voltage pulse through the vehicle, again disrupting the electronic ignition.
The voltage from the zapper will run through two plastic emitter holders. They will fire 4-inch long lightning bolts directly at the car as it passes by. These lightning bolts are so small and fast, they are nearly invisible to the human eye.
The way the system is set up is we have two emitter points here and here, about 3 feet apart, designed to strike the side of the vehicle as it passes. It creates a continuous current through the vehicle itself and disrupts the ignition system from those 2 points. And this is high voltage, and that goes in there like that. It's designed to be a single pulse system every few seconds. It's not designed to pulse rapidly. So what we did was we hooked it up to the power supply in the background here. The power supply is powered by just a car battery, a 12-volt standard car battery. That system provides the ability for us to pulse more rapidly through this technology. And that enhances our chances with a fast-moving vehicle.
The test vehicle is a 1996 Oldsmobile Bravada. Its engine is in good working condition and has in no way been modified.
I'm actually going to be driving the vehicle. In theory, I should be just fine, but I haven't actually told my wife I was going to be doing this. This thing generates 175,000 volts that'll be going through the vehicle. I'm assuming I'll be protected inside the cage that is created by the outer body of the vehicle, but should be okay. I'm kind of leaning on the fact that we develop non-lethal weapons to get me through this.
As the sun goes down, Bitar does some final adjustments.
We're going to have a gap of about 4 inches is what we're targeting. We're a little close now, but 2 to 4 inches is probably the optimum to create the maximum amount of voltage and still connect with the vehicle's outer body. So we're going to back up and set up for a high-speed pass.
The SUV heads toward the electrode. A technician begins to charge the capacitors. If the test is successful, a small bolt of lightning will kill the car engine without harming the driver. The concern, the voltage is nearly 100 times more powerful than an electric chair. Imagine a suicide bomber racing towards a military base with a car full of explosives. Pete Bitar thinks he's found a way to stop that vehicle cold in its tracks without using deadly force. It's with a device called the Zapper, a non-lethal directed energy weapon he invented. And he's about to put it to the test for the first time ever on television. These electrodes are building up a charge of 175,000 volts. If all goes as planned, the moment the SUV streaks by, a small lightning bolt will strike the vehicle, overload the electrical system like a circuit being overloaded in a house, blowing out the car's circuitry and bringing the SUV to a dead stop. Zap on, zap off.
So, the car died. I'm fine. I didn't feel anything at all. I was completely protected. I see the future of this type of system as being more portable, more capable, and more controllable, and be able to fit in your pocket or maybe even built into your cell phone.
Lasers and electricity aren't the only energy that can be weaponized. There is another. It's the energy used in a common kitchen appliance that makes it possible to pop popcorn or reheat leftovers in just a matter of moments. Microwaves. In the future, it will not be impossible for microwaves to be used in handheld weapons and even bombs, and their effects could be even more devastating than lasers. A handheld microwave weapon could roast a person from the inside. A microwave super bomb could cause a technological holocaust, shutting down every vehicle, radio, television, and computer, plunging an entire country into chaos. Dr. Ron Gilgenbach is director of the Plasma Pulse Power and Microwave Lab at the University of Michigan. He has been working with microwaves for more than 30 years.
We're in the Plasma Pulse Power and Microwave Lab at the University of Michigan. In this lab, we perform research on relativistic magnetrons that generate high-power microwave radiation. High-power microwaves are used for cooking food, of course, in your oven magnetron. These microwaves can interfere with the communications in your home. They can also interfere with military equipment. So there's a lot of interest in making very high power microwave sources like this relativistic magnetron, which is equivalent to 500,000 of your microwave ovens.
That's enough power to short-circuit the computers that control every facet of modern warfare, from radar communications to missile launches, paralyzing an entire military operation. This is part of the reason you're asked to turn off your cell phone on flights. There's a risk that these frequencies released by your phone could possibly interfere with airplane controls. Dr. Gilgenbach has devised a small-scale experiment to demonstrate that. He will blast a wristwatch with a high concentration of microwaves.
We've set up a small demonstration experiment in which an ultra-wideband generator, which is equivalent to about 1,000 of your microwave ovens, generates a 1 nanosecond pulse of ultra-wideband radiation. And we're going to show that the high-frequency, high-power electric fields can actually disrupt the operation of digital electronics.
Like Pete Bitar's zapper, which fries the circuitry in a vehicle, microwaves can do the same thing. A blast of microwaves will trigger a shock wave of electrical pulses that race through the air, generating a power surge that knocks out circuits.
This is very important to the Air Force Office of Scientific Research and other Department of Defense agencies, because if you could disrupt the electronics in your enemy's weaponry, then you could save our soldiers.
Dr. Gilgenbach is ready. If all goes as planned, the microwave pulse should shock the circuitry in the watch, knocking out the data programmed inside. He turns on the machine. Although invisible to the naked eye, this watch is being pounded with microwaves equivalent to 1,000 microwave ovens. Instantly, the data in the watch is completely wiped out. Now imagine the damage that could result from a microwave blast 1,000 times more powerful being detonated over the U.S. In a flash, every piece of electronics in the country would shut down. It would be like taking the country and transporting it back in time to the 1800s. The results would be devastating. As our electronics become more sophisticated, they also become more vulnerable to just this type of attack. And the military is developing a weapon that can do it. It's called an electromagnetic bomb, or E-bomb.
A kind of weapon that is in development that would be devastating in ways that we're not accustomed to seeing is one based around the idea of an electromagnetic pulse. This could be, for example, some sort of bomb that was set off in the atmosphere over a city, and it would generate a very powerful EMF pulse that would cover the city and short out every piece of electrical equipment there. Radios, computers, cars, everything inside range would be shorted out and destroyed.
Again, this is where science fact meets science fiction. This is a storyline seen in everything from comic books to cartoons to major Hollywood films, which might show up on the battlefield within the next 20 years.
There's a lot of interest in the DoD these days. They are tremendously interested in seeing one of these devices be packaged in a mobile platform, whether it could be a cruise missile or some other platform. And this device can then go flying around and could affect the electronics of your enemy, but without any collateral damage.
Technically, that kind of EMF bomb is one that's non-lethal. After all, it's not directly killing anybody. But of course, there would be a lot of fatalities that would result if that happened inside any kind of settled area. People who were in cars would lose control over their cars. Not to mention the anarchy that would suddenly break out.
Like lasers and death rays, an E-bomb can strike with deadly accuracy.
The thing about this kind of EMF weapon is that it scales very, very easily. Yes, you could use something that would be like a bomb and set it off over a city in order to try to take out an entire city, but you could do much smaller sorts of devices that would have a much more limited range. So you could take out a particular neighborhood. You could set off something like this down in Wall Street in the interest of trying to knock out the stock exchanges.
The war of the future is looking more and more like a scene from a science fiction movie. And perhaps our only protection from annihilation might also be from science fiction. In a wall of energy known as a force field. Is there a way to defend against the devastating power of directed energy weapons? The answer is yes, and the inspiration can once again be found in science fiction, and an impenetrable wall called a force field.
The Hollywood version of this was Independence Day, where the large spacecraft coming on Earth had around them force fields, and those force fields prevented you from launching a missile through them. It's feasible to conceive of having enough energy that you could create a plasma around you that could absorb laser radiation.
Plasma is a strange, almost magical element. It's the fourth state of matter, along with solid, liquid, and gas.
A lot of fascinating research these days is going on in the area of plasma research. Plasma is a type of matter that consists of a highly ionized gas. It's literally the stuff that stars are made of.
Plasma is the light energy seen in the stars in the Milky Way. The biggest piece of plasma you see every day is the sun. What makes plasma so effective as a force field is that it's composed of a swirling mass of very excited atoms that act like tornadoes, fracturing and ripping apart energy waves that try to pierce it. The U.S. Air Force understands plasma's potential, and since 1996 they have funded the work of Dr. Munir Lourousi, a pioneer in the field of plasma. Working at his lab at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, Dr. Lourousi will demonstrate plasma's power using a device he invented called the plasma pencil. It emits a small burst of plasma that can instantly kill germs.
By aiming the plasma plume on my finger here, what I'm practically doing is blasting away any bacteria that could be on there, but it's not affecting my finger in any way. It's able to kill bacteria, but not human cells.
The military is already looking at putting plasma force fields on fighter jets as the next generation of stealth technology. The idea: take something like the plasma pencil, scale it up, and mount it on different positions around a jet. The plasma emitted from the device would create a force field, shielding the jet from the probing attention of ground-based radar. Radar works by bouncing electromagnetic waves off an object. A plasma field would shred these waves, making the jet undetectable. Dr. Lourousi's studies focus on what's called cold plasma, because they can be created in room temperature environments. It's the type of plasma witnessed in the glow of a neon sign, or in the image from a plasma TV. Although he's developed the plasma pencil for non-military applications, he sees how cold plasmas could someday defend against certain types of directed energy weapons.
We know that plasma can absorb radiation, can reflect radiation. We know, for example, for microwaves, it can do that. But radiation comes in all frequencies and all energies, and we cannot just say general statement that it can absorb all kind of energy, all kind of radiation though.
But the goal is to develop force fields that can defend against everything, from death rays to nuclear missiles. And the solution might be in hot plasmas, the type seen in lightning and the sun.
If it's very hot plasma, it could evaporate or deflect physical objects.
A hot plasma force field would instantly vaporize any weapon hurled at it. It would be the ultimate game changer in war. But can it be built? Scientists at the U.S. Department of Energy's Brookhaven National Laboratory have created the world's first hot plasma force field. It's called a plasma window. 3 feet high and less than 1 foot in diameter, the temperature of this miniature force field is 21,632 degrees Fahrenheit, about 300 times hotter than the air at room temperature. The challenge is how to supersize a plasma window into a force field that can shield tanks, missile silos, even entire cities without reducing them to cinders.
It's a very expensive thing to do, so it's not in the near term, but it's not physically impossible.
One solution might be to layer cold and hot plasma, much the same way armor is layered to shield a tank from explosives.
It seems very possible that for military applications, we might eventually look at kind of nested force fields, fields within fields within fields, almost like the layers of an onion. One layer might be able to protect against laser attack. Another one might be able to protect against some sort of biological weapons. And some other one might be able to protect against a kind of electromagnetic pulse.
But is the government really staking our military superiority on going into battle armed with force fields, ray guns, and death beams, rather than bullets and missiles? A January 2009 document prepared by the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments, a U.S. Defense Department-funded think tank, clearly points to that future. Quote, "Lasers promise to be a transformational game changer in military operations." And on March 18, 2009, that battlefield strategy took another huge leap forward when Pentagon researchers at Northrop Grumman, one of the military's largest contractors, test-fired a 100-kilowatt laser, the most powerful battlefield-strength laser ever built.
A 10-kilowatt laser will quite readily cut off human limbs or any kind of tissue, so 10 kilowatts is already frighteningly high power. A 100-kilowatt laser is an amazing amount of high power.
Science has suddenly become more remarkable than the wildest science fiction fantasies. The battlefields of tomorrow will look a lot like the fantasy films of today.
Maybe it's a little too easy then to be able to take weapons that seemed as though they could have been nice and clean and efficient or maybe even non-lethal and suddenly turn them into some of the most devastating things that the world has ever seen.
I believe that the potential for the future to include things like what we have become accustomed to seeing in science fiction is very possible. We foresee the potential for handheld portable laser weapons and other directed energy to take the place of bullet-wielding weapons probably within our lifetime.
You have to assume that this sort of technology is going to keep on growing and expanding, and that the achievements of laser and directed energy weapons in the future are going to be even more awesome.